you please be seated? So I have a favor, guys. Can we go back to the song we were just on? I want to look at those words just for a second. No, before that. Not that one. The other one. Before it. Yeah. There, just roll these for a second. Sometimes songs like this make me really nervous. Just keep. No, that's not it. Is that it? Yeah. Okay, keep going to. No, that wasn't it, was it? Is it? Are you sure? Okay. Thank you. Thank God Madeline's here. Okay. Keep going. I'm open. I'm open. My heart is an open space for you to come and have your way. Really? Really? Like sometimes I worry, like I sing things like, man, do I really want this? Do I really want God to come start messing around? Really? I mean, it's one thing to sing about it, but really? Can we go just the a little bit more? Keep going. There's part of this just like, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little more. Oh, that one. Anybody want to take that back? I don't know. Anybody sing that and like thinking like, I don't know, second thought. I don't know. So we're just going to hold that loose for a minute because, like, really? Do I really want God to do whatever you want to do? Because that kind of leads into the scripture tonight. So we've been talking about different questions Jesus asked. So this is from Luke 6, beginning with verse 46. Jesus starts with a question, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and don't do what I say? Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and don't do what I say? Then he says, I'll show you what it's like when somebody comes to me, hears my words, and puts them into practice. It's like a person building a house by digging deep, laying a foundation on bedrock. When the flood came, the rising water smashed against that house. But the water couldn't shake the house because it was well built. But those who don't put into practice what they hear are like a person who built a house without a foundation. The flood water smashed against it, and it collapsed instantly. It was completely destroyed. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and don't do what I say? So there's parts of the world where there's earthquakes, of course, and there's certain parts of the world where there's a geological phenomenon called liquefaction. So when they build buildings in certain places, they have to pay attention to this possibility called liquefaction. What that means is that when there's a certain amount of moisture in the soil and the earth shakes at a certain level, like on the Richter scale, that those two realities come together and soil that previously appeared to be solid and stable basically liquefies, becomes like quicksand, and the structures that are built on it sink into it. Now, did you catch what I said? It appeared previously to be solid. Like they built it because they looked at the soil, they felt the soil, they tested the soil, looks solid, we can build a house on this, we can build a building on this. But then when it was just the right conditions and things started shaking, it sunk. Right? The appearance of stability, the appearance of strength. So a lot of us are like that. Like we give the appearance that we got our act together. We give the appearance that our life is good. Got my act together. I'm making good grades. I got a good job. I'm making a lot of money. I got good friends. Everything is good. But then when the shaking comes, when the storm blows, when things aren't going well, sometimes we discover that people's lives aren't as strong and stable and secure as they said they were. And it even happens in the world of faith, right? Sometimes it's easy to say, yes, I'm a Christian. Yes, I believe in Jesus. I can sing these songs. I feel really good about them. But in reality, when I walk out the doors of church, I start living by a whole different set of values. I start living by a whole different set of priorities. I start living by a whole different standard. So church becomes this thing I do on Sunday, and I have my Sunday friends, and I have my Sunday way of acting. But then I live a whole different way during the week when the shaking comes, right? When the storm starts raging, is there a foundation in place? So Jesus often drew big crowds of people, right? You know that. But you ever stop and think who's in the crowd? Like there are times there are thousands of people. Do you think everybody in the crowds of thousands were a 100% supporter of Jesus? Everybody was there with pure motives, right? No. There are people there that were actually seeking like Jesus and what Jesus represented, and they actually, started following him. They actually became his disciples. Their lives were transformed. There are other people who are just curious. Like when there's a crowd, people like start gathering around. Like, what's going on? Right? What's happening here? Right? Or some people were just desperate. They heard he could do miracles. So they would go, anybody comes to town, does a miracle, I'll go. Jesus, Joe, Frank, anybody, I'll go. Right? It wasn't Jesus that attracted them. It was the miracle that attracted them. Some people actually came like, really, like I want to follow somebody, but then Jesus just made it too hard. Like there was this rich guy that came and said, I want to be your follower. He says, good, go sell everything you have. Nope, that's too hard. I don't want to do that. Don't want to do that. Right? Or we saw the story last week. God wanted to follow Jesus. Jesus said, no, you need to stay back at home, right? So there's a mixture of people, Jesus knew that. In fact, Jesus had enemies in the crowd too, the Pharisees, the religious people. They were there just fault finding, picking at him, trying to figure out like, how can we get this guy? So a mixture of people. But to the whole crowd, a big crowd, Jesus says, why do you call me Lord, Lord, but you don't do what I say? Now, not everybody in the crowd was calling Jesus Lord, but some were. For some, I think it was just trying to get on Jesus' good side. And we don't call each other Lord, right? But it was a sign of respect for him. Lord, right? They would address them, even people who didn't really respect him all that much. They were just trying to get on his good side. They were just trying to win him over. For some people, they wanted him to be Lord, but they didn't really want him to be Lord. They wanted to be Lord. You know what I mean by that, right? They didn't really conform their life to Jesus. They wanted Jesus to conform his life to them. Right? They weren't ready necessarily to get on the Jesus agenda. It was more, I want to get Jesus to get on my agenda. Does this sound at all familiar? We all do this, by the way. Right? Every time you find yourself getting a little frustrated with Jesus, it's because he's not doing what you want him to do. Right? How often do we stop and think, well, but what do you want me to do? Right? So in this crowd, all kinds of different people. All kinds of different people, all kinds of different agendas. Jesus says, why do you call me Lord, Lord? But you don't do what I say. You don't do what I say. There's a guy named Dallas Willard that wrote some books that I really like. He said, plainly in the eyes of Jesus, there's no good reason for not doing what he said to do, for he only tells us to do what is best. Do you believe that? Jesus only tells us to do what is best. Do we believe that? Then why don't we do it? So Jesus tells a story. He gives an example. I tell you good things to do, but you don't do them. What's up with that? So he gives an example. He says there's two people. They both build a house. One builds a house on like solid foundation rock. So when the winds come, the waters rise, the earth shakes, house stands strong. Another guy builds his house on sand. When the winds blow, the waters rise, like what happens? Falls down. So that's a lot like following me. This is what I just read, Luke 6:47. I'll show you what it's like when someone comes to me, hears my words, and puts them into practice. It's like a person building a house by digging deep and laying the foundation on bedrock. Now, that's in Luke. Matthew tells Jesus telling the same story. Same story happens in Luke and Matthew. Matthew tells one little detail that I think is really significant. It says in Matthew 7:24, everybody who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a what? A wise builder. Not just a builder, like a wise builder who built a house on bedrock. A wise builder. So anyone who hears my words and puts them into practice is like a what kind of builder? A wise builder. Did you notice there's two parts? Anyone who hears what I have to say and then does it. Right? Listens to my teaching and then acts on my teaching. Friends, a lot of times we spend more time listening than doing. Right? We come to church and we hear all about Jesus and all that Jesus, offers us and wants to do, and then we leave and go do our other stuff. Right? What we do in here is meant to be lived out there. Right? Church isn't meant to just be a one-day a week thing. This is about an all-day, every day, living my life like Jesus lived his life. Anyone who listens to what I say and does what I say, puts it into action, is like a wise person who built their house on rock. So you remember a couple weeks ago, you just mentioned Todd, right? Todd's over in the Bahamas because there was a storm. The name of the storm was, anybody? Dorian, good. Yeah, Dorian just blew through here. And so do you remember there were the days, weeks, months, years leading up to Dorian, the decades leading up that we were watching it on the news, They first started talking about it when I was in kindergarten, and we just kept, it was just, and maybe it's going to make direct impact, and then no, it's not going to make direct impact, but it's going to go up the coast, right? And what's going to happen to the coast because of Dorian? They kept talking about it. Erosion, right? It's going to be king tides, and big waves, and it's going to wash, and we're going to lose lots and lots of our beaches, right? Well, we didn't. Other people, thankfully we didn't. But I don't know if have you ever been to the beach after one of those storms and seen what happens to some of the houses, right? So one of the things I like to do, I ride a motorcycle. I really like riding up and down A1A, from like South Florida up to Jacksonville. Some places are real grubby. That's my kind of place. Then there are some places that are super rich, right? Donald Trump has friends living down in West Palm, right? Go up to Jacksonville, Ponte Vedra Beach, all of that. There are houses along the Florida coast I didn't even know about when I was growing up. Multi-million-dollar homes, massive mansions out there on the beach. And you know what happens when the sand erodes the foundation, right? They become worthless. Right? This happens. Like sometimes these very, very expensive, high-end properties, after the waves come and the sand starts like washing away, they become worthless. Because sand isn't all that great to build on. Right? And so what was yesterday before the storm a multi-million-dollar piece of property, tomorrow, not so much. Right? I want you to listen to me. I've seen a lot of these really fancy homes. I ride by on my bike, I wave, and everybody lets me in. I haven't seen one. I don't care how valuable it was. I haven't seen one more valuable than your life. I've yet to see a piece of beach property more valuable than you. And I would say that the loss of a beach property, I don't care how much it's worth, because of erosion, because the sand beneath it washed away, is no greater loss than the loss of somebody whose foundation in their life washed away. That's easy for me to say. I don't own a beach house, so, whatever. What I'm saying is the foundation you're building your life on matters. Right? Sometimes we just look at what's built by the beach and go, wow, that's impressive. Well, it's not so impressive when it's falling into the ocean. Right? Sometimes we give the appearance of, man, my life, I got it all together. My life is great. Are you building a foundation under it that will prove stable when the storm comes, when the earthquake comes? Because remember, there's no immunity for Christians. Like, we face challenges too. Sometimes we lose our jobs. Sometimes we don't do good in a class at school. Sometimes a friend betrays us. Sometimes we have trouble in our house. Sometimes just life gets hard, right? Jesus said rain falls on the good and the bad alike. When the rain falls, what are you standing on? And Jesus says a wise person is standing a foundation that's built by two things. You've listened to me and you've put it into action. It's that simple. You've listened to me, and you've put it into action. So I'm just going to read you a couple passages of Scripture very quickly. I want you to notice the word do, how prevalent it is. James 2:14. My brothers and sisters, what good is it if people say they have faith, but what? Do nothing to show it. Or some versions say, don't you know faith without works is, anybody? Dead, right? The prophet Micah asks, what should I do to approach the Lord and bow down before God on high? The answer, he's told you what is good and what the Lord requires of you. To do justice, embrace faithful love, walk humbly with your God, Jesus himself, Matthew 7:21. Not everybody who says to me, Lord, Lord, will get into the kingdom of heaven. Only those who, what? Do the will. Like, do's an action word. Right? It's an action word. Sometimes we think, well, it's just, I'm a member of a church. I go to church sometimes. And I believe in this stuff. Okay, good. Now what are you going to do with it? Right? Good, you believe it. Yeah, the demons believed in Jesus too. Right? What are you going to do with it? How are you going to put it into action? So let's go back to the word wisdom for just a minute. Remember, Jesus said, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise builder who built a house on a rock. I want you to think for a minute, who's the wisest person you know, other than Emily? Who's the wisest person you know? Who comes to mind? Anybody? Just anybody volunteer? Who comes to mind? When you think of wisdom, you think of who? Your father. And why is your father a wise person? He thinks before he speaks. Oh, wouldn't it be great if we all did that? Or think before we tweet or anything, right? Okay. Who else? I heard other over here. Your mother. What makes your mother wise? Try to be the best you can. Good. And don't lie. That's wise too. Good. Good. Anybody else? Wise person? Yes. Your brother. What makes your brother wise? Okay, so that's what we think of that too, wise. Like we can go to this person, right? So sometimes we think of wise people as being intelligent or knowledgeable or experienced. Somebody I can go to for advice. We often think of older people as wise. They've been through some things, they've learned from experience. All of that's true. In the Bible, when it talks about wisdom, it's all that and more. The more is that we believe it's a gift from God. That God makes people really wise. God helps people to be wise. And sometimes when we talk about wisdom kind of just in a worldly way, it's really like, oh, you have a good insight. That's good, right? Biblical wisdom is all about action. It's knowing what to do. To be biblically wise means I know what to do. I know the right action. I know the right step to take now. I've learned it through knowledge, and God is guiding me. So wisdom is an action kind of word. This is from Proverbs 4:6. Do not forsake wisdom. She will protect you. Love her, and she will watch over you. That's wise. Jesus said, it's wise to listen to me and then do what I said. So, does that make sense? Listen to Jesus and do what he said. So go do it. So go do it. Well, to go do it, I need to know what he says, right? I need to have listened. It begins with knowing what he said. Well, we could that's what we do here every week. We talk about what Jesus said. But I just want to talk for a minute, just a quick little review. What did Jesus say to do? Well, this particular story falls in a group of teachings called the Sermon on the Mount. It's an extended teaching. And there's a number of things Jesus says to do in the Sermon on the Mount. I'm just going to review them very quickly. Jesus says, let your light so shine that people will see your good deeds and honor your Father in heaven. Do good deeds. Jesus says, love your enemies. Don't hate them. Love them. Talks about being sexually faithful, even in our thought life. He says, don't seek revenge. Don't do that. Forgive in the same way that God's forgiven you. Give to the poor. Pray. Don't store up earthly treasures that will rust and moths will eat. Don't worry about what you're going to wear, what you're going to eat. Seek first the kingdom of God above everything else. Make it your top priority. Don't judge people. Don't judge the person who got a little speck in their eye because you know what, you've got a log in yours and that looks silly. Don't be a hypocrite. You know what a hypocrite is? Right? Don't be a hypocrite. We could go on, right? That's a pretty good start, right? Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do what I say? It's a pretty hard list already. But we could add on lots of other teachings that Jesus has. And then we could also go to the Old Testament and talk about all the laws in the Old Testament. Sometimes we do this weird thing where we go like, oh, the Old Testament has all these laws. I like Jesus because he got rid of all the laws. Jesus actually said, I didn't come to get rid of any of them. I didn't come to destroy any of them at all. But one day they came to him and they said, okay, well, there's a lot of rules. There's a lot of, what's the most important one, Jesus? He said, there's one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, all your strength on Sunday mornings. Is that what he said? When you're at church. Is that what he said? When people are watching you, but when they're not watching, do whatever you want. Did he say? No, right? All the time. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, all your strength. When you're at school, when you're at work, when you're at home, when you're with your wife, when you're with your boyfriend, with your friends, when nobody's looking. Love the Lord your God with everything you are, all the time, no exceptions. And by the way, he didn't finish there, and he said, and, I'm not done, love your neighbor as you love yourself. So then one day they came to Jesus, they're like, okay, we get that, but like, who's my neighbor? Meaning, like, who do I really have to love? What did he say? Everybody. Everybody is your neighbor. Love everybody. He said there is no greater love. There's no greater commandment this than to love. Love. So I just want you to follow where we were. Jesus said, so why do you call me Lord, Lord? We don't do what I say. Right? He's talking about following his commands. So what is Jesus' command? It means a lot of things. Most important is that we love. Right? But then he kind of wraps a nice bow around it, kind of ties it completely. In John 15:14, he says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. So basically what that means is, like, you want to show Jesus you love Jesus? If you claim you love Jesus, how are you going to show him? By doing it, by living it. But the opposite may be true also. What if we just say we believe this stuff? What if we just, claim to believe this stuff, but we don't actually do it? What does that communicate to Jesus about whether or not we really love? Right? If you obey my commandments, you'll show me that you love me. So I made this little list here this morning. I want you to let it just doesn't apply to you, then you can just ignore it. But Jesus says, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and don't do what I say? I wonder if some other ways he might ask the question would be, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not love the people I love? Why do you call me Lord, Lord, but love your money and possessions more than you love me? Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and look down your nose at people I made in my own image? Why do you call me Lord, Lord, but only calling me when you need me? Otherwise, not so much. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, but only fit me into your life when it's convenient, when nothing else is going on? Why do you call me Lord, Lord, but dismiss me when my teachings seem, outdated, impractical, irrelevant? Why do you call me Lord, Lord, yet demonstrate so little faith and so much fear? Emily talked about that. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and steal my tithe from me? We'll talk about that in a couple weeks. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, while you chase after every conceivable man-made idol in existence? Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and care so little about justice? Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and know so little of what I taught? Why do you call me Lord, Lord, but live by the world's values instead of mine? Why do you call me Lord, Lord, but look like everybody else out in the world in the way you behave, the way you function, by the things you buy, by how you live? Shouldn't you look a little more like Jesus? Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and spend so little time with me? Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and ignore so much of what I've said? So imagine for a moment that, there's been the hurricane or there's been the earthquake or whatever, and there's this building standing, but there's some question marks about it, right? Is it still safe? Can we live in that house? Can we go to work in that building? Like, it's still safe. So the inspectors come out and they check the foundations, right? And they do a little bit of looking around. They want to see, are there any cracks in the foundation? Is there any part that's kind of uneven? Has something sunk away? Has it broken? Ultimately, can we use this, or are we going to have to just tear it down? Is the foundation secure enough that we can use this? I want you to imagine for a moment the inspector's coming to check your foundation. What will the inspector find? Solid foundation? Or a few too many cracks? A few too many soft spots? Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and don't do what I say? Let's pray. So Lord, help us to be honest with ourselves. Nobody does this perfect. You know that, Lord. There's not a person in this room, not me, not Emily, not anybody who has a perfect foundation. Lord, help us. Lord, help us to be more attentive to what you say, to pay more attention to what you say, to want to know what you say, and to do it. Help us to be better at doing, Lord. Help us to be wise. It's in Jesus' name we pray.